When the ocean turns violent, even calm water can hide monsters. Great whites ram boats, tiger sharks snatch swimmers beneath cliffs, and hammerheads rocket from reefs with shocking speed. Even rivers and floodwaters conceal predators bold enough to strike in knee-deep water. From divers ambushed in the blue to an angler caught off guard near shore. In this video, we'll dive into real-life shark and sea predator encounters that show how fast beauty becomes terror. Watch till the end. On February 9, 2025, the ocean off Gansbaai shimmered like glass under the morning sun. Marcel van Rensburg, a 38-year-old deep-sea diver from Cape Town, adjusted his gear on the deck of a research vessel as the waves lapped softly against the hull. He had spent years exploring shipwrecks, collecting footage for marine documentaries, and studying large predators that ruled these waters. Diving had been his passion since childhood, and nothing thrilled him more than venturing into the deep where few dared to go. Alongside him was Leila Naidu, 32, a marine ecologist known for her calm focus and sharp instincts underwater. The two had worked together for years, building a reputation for capturing some of the most striking images of ocean life. Their small team of divers prepared to explore the sunken freighter resting nearly 60 meters below the surface, its steel frame coated in coral and teeming with fish. The morning seemed perfect. The sea was calm, visibility clear, and the crew relaxed as they descended into the blue. As they neared the wreck, the light dimmed, and beams from their flashlights swept across schools of shimmering fish. The freighter lay silent, its shape ghostly against the sand. They moved carefully, recording footage of the rusted decks and sea growth clinging to the structure. Tiny bubbles floated upward, the only sound in the quiet underwater world. For a time, everything felt peaceful, almost serene. Then the ocean changed. A shadow appeared below, moving slowly but with a weight that sent a ripple through the water. At first, they thought it was a large great white shark, something not unusual in these regions. But as the shape grew clearer, the divers froze in disbelief. Emerging from the depths came a massive form, far larger than any shark they had seen before. Its length stretched more than 20 feet, the body thick and muscular, its skin scarred and pale against the deep blue. Marcel steadied his camera, capturing every second as the creature passed beneath them, its size dwarfing the freighter wreck. The predator's slow movements carried an eerie grace, its tail sweeping in wide arcs that stirred clouds of sand. For a moment, it seemed to glide peacefully, uninterested in the divers above. Then a sudden burst of bubbles rose from one side. Leila's fin had brushed against a metal beam, releasing a sharp sound that drew the shark's attention. In a flash, the giant shifted direction and surged upward. Water pressure rippled as its head angled toward them, its jaws gaping wide enough to engulf a human whole. Leila twisted to avoid the strike, her body spinning as the shark's snout passed inches from her arm. Marcel's camera caught the moment in a trembling blur, a wall of teeth and motion cutting through the light. The divers scattered, kicking toward the freighter's shadow, their hearts racing as the giant circled again, its movement slow but deliberate. The water darkened as the predator hovered nearby, its presence dominating the silent deep. For several tense minutes, the divers held their positions, pressed against the wreck's surface, barely breathing as the shark passed once more, close enough to feel the current from its tail. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the massive creature turned and drifted into the blackness below, vanishing like a phantom into the endless deep. The dark shape slipped away into the deep, leaving the divers frozen in place. The sudden stillness felt heavy, almost unreal, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Marcel kept his body pressed close to the wreck, his pulse pounding in his ears. Leila gripped a metal beam, her limbs shaking from the sudden rush of fear. The water around them slowly settled, but the memory of that huge form stayed sharp in their minds. For a long moment, none of them moved. The giant could still be lurking just beyond the reach of their lights, hidden in the dark below. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every faint swirl of sand made their hearts jump. The team signaled to one another with slow, careful hand motions, making sure everyone was safe and unhurt. Even without words, they shared the same thought. They had come far too close to something far more powerful than they were. When Marcel finally pushed away from the wreck, he did so with calm and steady movements. The group rose together in a tight formation. keeping their lights pointed downward as they swam upward. Each kick felt heavy, as though the ocean was trying to pull them back into the darkness. Layla's breath came out rough and fast, but she fought to stay focused, keeping herself close to the others. At last, the surface glow came into sight. The shift from dark blue to pale green brought a wave of relief. They climbed onto the research vessel one by one, dragging off their gear with trembling hands. Once on deck, the world seemed brighter and louder, the sea breeze brushing their cold faces as they steadied themselves. The crew hurried to them, helping with tanks and fins while the divers sat down, trying to understand what had just happened. Marcel reviewed the footage on his camera, his hands still unsteady. The huge outline of the predator filled the screen, moving in wide, smooth sweeps that made it look almost unreal. The size alone stunned everyone. It reminded them of stories about ancient sea creatures, the kind people believed were long gone. The team whispered among themselves, feeling a mix of awe and fear, knowing they had seen something few humans ever witnessed. As the boat headed back toward shore, the divers rested in silence. The sunlight glimmered on the waves, peaceful and calm, almost mocking the chaos that had happened below. Layla watched the horizon, still replaying the moment when the giant lunged at her. It left her shaken but grateful to be alive. The experience spread quickly through their research group in the days that followed. Experts studied the footage, unsure whether the shark was simply unusually large or a rare species. The divers knew only one thing: the ocean still held secrets far bigger and far more powerful than they ever imagined. The encounter reminded them that even skilled explorers could be humbled in an instant by the vast, unpredictable deep. On April 8, 2025, the morning sky above Grand Turk shimmered with sunlight reflecting off restless waves. Darian Cole, a 29-year-old adventure enthusiast known for his daring stunts, stood on the open side of a hovering helicopter. Cameras rolled as the wind whipped across his face. He had spent years chasing moments that balanced on the edge of danger. Cliff dives, sky jumps, underwater free dives, all filmed for the thrill of the unknown. This new challenge, a mid-air dive into open Caribbean waters, was meant to push his limits once more. From a young age, Darian had been fascinated by the ocean's power. Growing up near the coast, he often swam far from shore, drawn by the mystery of deep water. Now, with years of experience in extreme sports, he carried both confidence and a growing sense of invincibility. But beneath the surface that morning, something else waited, a silent presence drawn by vibration and sound. As the helicopter steadied above the sea, the pilot gave a signal. Darian adjusted his small camera, steadying his breathing before stepping off into the air. The fall was quick, the water striking him like a wall of cold glass. For a moment, there was silence, only bubbles and the muffled hum of rotors above. He surfaced, catching his breath, raising one arm to signal success to the crew. The waves rocked around him, playful yet unpredictable, the salt stinging small scratches on his skin. Then the sea changed. A faint shadow appeared beneath him, gliding in slow, deliberate circles. It was a 7-foot oceanic white-tipped shark, sleek and curious, drawn by the commotion. Darian, unaware at first, adjusted his position, trying to reach the floating line that had been dropped from the helicopter. The shadow moved closer. A sudden jolt followed, a violent tug that tore through his leg. The shark's jaws clamped down on his calf, the water erupting into foam and spray. Pain shot through him as he kicked wildly, blood clouding the water. The predator twisted, shaking its head in short bursts before releasing its grip, only to circle again. The waves thrashed, throwing him off balance. He fought to stay above the surface, gasping for air as adrenaline took over. The crew shouted from above, tossing flotation lines and striking the sea to distract the creature. The water churned with motion, waves, bubbles, and the sleek flash of white-tipped fins cutting through the surface. Darian's breathing grew ragged as he struggled to grab the rope. Every second felt stretched, the helicopter's shadow flickering across the restless water. The shark brushed past his side again, nudging him with chilling precision, testing him as if deciding whether to strike again. The hum of an approaching boat broke through the chaos, its engine roaring closer. But the sea still held him in its grasp, and the predator wasn't done circling. The safety boat cut through the rough water, closing the distance as Darian struggled to stay afloat. The oceanic whitetip continued circling, its movement slow but steady, creating small waves that pushed him off balance each time he tried to reach for the floating line beside him. His injured leg throbbed, warm blood spreading through the cold sea, pulling the predator even closer. He kicked weakly with his other foot, trying to keep space between himself and the dark shape gliding beneath the surface. The helicopter above cast long shadows over the water, but even that brought little comfort as the shark brushed his side again. A crew member on the boat leaned out with a long pole, striking the surface near the shark. The sudden splash startled the animal, causing it to veer slightly to the left. The shift gave Darian a brief opening. With what little energy he had left, he pushed his body forward, reaching the flotation rope a second time. His fingers locked around it, trembling from exhaustion. The crew hauled him in slowly, careful not to pull too hard in case the shark lunged again. Every meter felt like an hour as he slid across foam and broken waves, the predator still circling but hesitant after the sudden disturbance. When he was finally within reach of the boat, two hands grabbed his arms and lifted him over the side. He collapsed onto the deck, chest rising sharply as he gasped for air. His leg was covered in deep cuts, some stretching across muscle, leaving his skin bruised and torn. Water pooled beneath him, tinted faintly red. The crew secured bandages around the wounds, pressing down to slow the bleeding as the safety boat sped toward shore. While the boat raced across the waves, Darian lay still, staring at the sky as the tremors in his body slowly faded. The shock began to settle, giving way to a heavy mix of fear and relief. The choppy sea behind them rolled quietly once more, and the shark disappeared into open water as if nothing had happened. Back on land, medical teams rushed him to a nearby clinic. The injuries, though serious, were treatable. Doctors cleaned the cuts, stitched the deepest ones, and wrapped his leg in thick layers of gauze. The pain lingered, but the knowledge that he had survived kept him calm. In the days that followed, Darian replayed the moment again and again. The stunt he once thought thrilling now felt reckless. The encounter became a hard reminder that the ocean holds dangers even the bravest cannot fully predict. On November 7, 2024, the sun hung bright above the calm turquoise waters near Dyer Island, Gansbai. The private yacht Ocean Pearl moved smoothly across the sea, its white hull glinting in the light. On board were 5 friends who had gathered to celebrate a birthday, their laughter carried by the ocean breeze. Among them was Liam Voss, a 34-year-old from Cape Town, known for his easy smile and deep love for the sea. He worked as a travel photographer, often exploring South Africa's coastlines and capturing its wildlife and raw beauty through his lens. His friends had planned this short cruise to unwind, a day meant for joy, music, and freedom. The morning unfolded peacefully. Dolphins had been spotted earlier, and the group took turns leaning over the rail, snapping pictures of the glimmering waves. Liam, always restless for the perfect shot, had brought his waterproof camera to document the trip. He had spent years diving and snorkeling, confident in his comfort level around the ocean. To him, the water was a second home, its unpredictability something he respected but did not fear. By late morning, the yacht drifted closer to Dyer Island, known for its large seal colony and the marine life that followed. The surface sparkled, and seabirds soared overhead. No one on board noticed the dark shadow moving below, the slow, steady glide of a great white shark patrolling its feeding territory. The predator had been following the scent of seals and fish, circling deeper before slowly rising toward the surface. As the group chatted near the stern, a sudden splash drew their attention. Liam's camera had slipped from the deck and floated just beyond reach. Without hesitation, he leaned over the side, one hand gripping the railing as he stretched to retrieve it. The others laughed lightly, unaware of what lurked below. The gentle sound of water against the hull masked the faint stir of movement beneath him. Then, the stillness shattered. From below, a massive shape surged upward, its speed breaking the calm sea into chaos. The 16-foot great white slammed into the yacht's side with crushing force, sending a loud crack through the air. In the same motion, its jaws snapped around Liam's leg, teeth tearing deep as the predator yanked him from the deck into the water. A flash of white foam, blood, and churning waves followed. Panic spread instantly. His friends screamed as the yacht rocked, one of them trying to grab his arm before he vanished beneath the surface. The shark thrashed violently, shaking its prey with brutal power. Liam resurfaced briefly, his face twisted in pain, before being pulled under again. The water turned red as waves slammed against the hull. The predator's tail cut through the surface, leaving a trail of bubbles and foam. The sea, once calm and inviting, had turned wild and merciless. The others scrambled for ropes, their hands trembling as they tried to reach him. Each movement seemed too late. The predator circled again, the turquoise water swirling into crimson clouds as the desperate struggle continued. The sea continued to churn as the others leaned over the rail, reaching into the red-streaked water, their arms shaking with fear and shock. Waves slapped hard against the hull, tilting the yacht as the great white moved beneath the surface in slow, heavy passes. Every surge of water carried another smear of color, spreading farther into the turquoise around them. They tried to pull at drifting pieces of gear, hoping for any sign of movement, but the ocean gave nothing back. The predator had vanished into the deep, leaving only widening clouds that drifted slowly in the gentle current. The deck felt frozen in time as the group staggered backward, their bodies weak and unsteady. One of the crew members rushed to signal for help, sending distress calls while trying to lock the railings to steady the rocking vessel. The birthday gathering had turned into a silent, heavy moment where every breath felt sharp. The afternoon light still shimmered on the water, indifferent to the chaos that had unfolded beneath it. Rescue boats began approaching from a distance, their engines humming through the stillness. The friends huddled together, each face marked with shock and disbelief. They kept staring at the place where the sea had swallowed their companion, hoping for any sign. But the water had settled again, calm in a way that felt cruel. When the first responders boarded the yacht, they found the passengers trembling, trying to explain in short, breathless sentences what had happened. The crew pointed toward floating scraps near the stern, showing the last traces of the struggle. Search teams scanned the area, marking currents and the direction of drift, and pulling up fragments that rose to the surface. The sea slowly cleared, revealing nothing more. Hours felt like days as rescue workers continued their efforts. When they finally brought back what they could recover, the weight of the loss settled heavily over everyone on board. The yacht returned to the harbor, its passengers wrapped in blankets, their steps slow as they crossed the dock. Officials met them with calm voices and steady hands, guiding them toward waiting vehicles. News of the event spread quickly, and experts later said the location's feeding patterns and sudden splashing drew the predator's attention. A small memorial formed near the water's edge in the following days, made of simple flowers and photographs. People paused as they passed, reflecting on how fast calm waters could change. For those who had been there, the sight of the sea would never feel the same again, carrying both the memory of a joyful outing and the moment it turned into something none of them could ever forget. On July 22, 2020, Jasmine Rivera floated calmly above the warm waters of Bimini, her camera glinting beneath the bright sun. At 26, she had saved for months to visit the Bahamas, drawn by its reefs and vivid sea life. Back home in Miami, she worked long hours at a travel agency, always daydreaming about the ocean she had loved since childhood. This trip was meant to be a break, a reward for herself after years of planning vacations for others. She joined a local snorkeling group early that morning, carrying her waterproof camera and wearing a light blue wetsuit, eager to capture every color and movement beneath the waves. The ocean stretched around her in endless shades of turquoise and sapphire. Small schools of fish darted between the coral, their silver scales flashing in the sunlight. The reef below seemed calm, alive with the soft sway of sea fans and the quiet pulse of marine life. Nearby, a few other tourists drifted, their fins stirring clouds of sand. Jasmine swam slowly toward a wide patch of coral, where a large ray glided gracefully over the seabed. The creature's calm movement fascinated her, and she began following it carefully, hoping for the perfect photo. But what she didn't see was the shadow moving farther out in the blue, a 10-foot scalloped hammerhead, larger than any the guides had seen so close to the shallow reef. Normally, these sharks stayed farther offshore, hunting in deeper channels. Yet on this quiet morning, the predator had drifted closer, curious about the activity and movement in the water. For several minutes, it circled at a distance, gliding silently, its wide head scanning with precision as it approached the reef's edge. As Jasmine adjusted her fins, she reached her arm toward the ray. Her motion sent a sudden burst of bubbles and sound through the water. To her, it was a simple movement. To the shark, it was a signal of prey and distress. In an instant, the calm sea changed. From below, the hammerhead surged upward with explosive power, the water around it swirling into chaos. It lunged at her side, its jaws clamping down on her thigh with brutal force. The impact spun her around violently. Pain shot through her body as the shark twisted, pulling her downward into the clouded water. She kicked and struck out wildly, her arms flailing as she tried to push the massive body away. Her blood mixed with sand, spreading through the water like a red haze. The once clear sea turned into a blur of motion, fins, bubbles, and streaks of color. The guides, spotting the sudden disturbance, dove in fast. They used poles and flotation devices, striking the water to distract the predator. The hammerhead turned sharply, snapping at one of the poles before circling again. For a moment it hovered beneath Jasmine, the shadow of its head cutting across the light. Then, as quickly as it had come, it drifted back toward the deeper blue, leaving behind silence and shock. The guides rushed to pull her from the water as the others watched in horror. The calm reef now a scene of chaos and fear. The guides carried Jasmine toward the boat with steady, urgent movements, trying to keep her upper body above the churning surface. The water around them still held a fading cloud of red, drifting in soft trails behind her. Her legs trembled as they lifted her, and the marks on her thigh grew clearer with every second, deep lines where the predator's teeth had torn through skin and left dark bruises spreading around the edges. The once smooth rhythm of the morning had vanished, replaced by shaking hands, splashing fins, and a quiet fear pressing against every heartbeat. She was placed gently on the deck, where towels and first aid kits were scattered from hurried hands. The warmth of the boat's floor contrasted sharply with the sting running along her leg. Her wetsuit clung tightly, torn in several places, revealing wounds that stretched from her thigh toward her hip. Her breathing came in short, uneven bursts as someone wrapped bandages around the deepest cuts. Drops of seawater slid down her face, mixing with sweat and tiny grains of sand. The reef that had sparkled in soft colors only moments earlier now felt far away. The laughter and excitement of the morning had been replaced by a stillness that sank into everyone who had been nearby. Tourists held onto the railings, wide-eyed, watching the sea's surface as if expecting the large shape to return. Even the distant fish seemed to have disappeared, leaving the reef silent beneath the sun. The guides worked with calm, steady hands as they secured the bandages and cleaned the smaller cuts around her legs. Every touch made the bruises pulse, but Jasmine stayed still, focusing on the soft rocking of the boat. Her camera lay forgotten near her feet, its lens cracked from the sudden thrashing underwater. The bright excitement she felt earlier that morning felt distant, replaced by a slow realization that the quiet reef had nearly taken her life. As the boat moved toward the shore, the water behind them rippled in soft waves. The wide blue space looked peaceful again, hiding the predator that had vanished into the deeper channel. Light glimmered on the surface, but no one looked at it with the same calm as before. Jasmine lay on a padded seat, her body tense, listening to the hum of the engine and the soft murmur of wind passing over the bow. The dull ache in her leg spread upward, making her chest tighten with each breath. When they reached the dock, lifeguards and medical workers lifted her onto a stretcher. The warm sand beneath the pier contrasted with the cool boards of the walkway as they carried her toward a waiting ambulance. People nearby stepped aside, whispering as they saw the bandages and the torn wetsuit. The gentle summer afternoon carried hints of salt and sunscreen, yet the air seemed heavier. At the clinic, nurses cleaned each wound more carefully, checking the bruises spreading across her thigh and hip. They counted the gashes, noting how close the predator's bite had come to deeper muscle. The pain came in waves as they applied fresh coverings, but she stayed still, letting the steady hands work. The bright light overhead made the cuts look sharper, reminding her of the moment when the calm reef shifted into a violent burst. Later, as she rested on the bed with her leg elevated, the world around her grew quiet. The fear slowly faded, replaced by a heavy exhaustion. She thought of the soft rays she had followed, the colors she had admired, and how her simple movement had changed everything. The day left her shaken, yet grateful to be alive. Though the reef remained beautiful, she now understood the hidden strength beneath its surface. The sea had shown its wild nature, and the memory would stay with her long after the wounds healed. On October 28, 2025, the morning sun lit up the cliffs of Maui, painting the ocean below in shades of blue and silver. Lila Kealoha stood at the edge of a rugged cliff, camera mounted nearby, her heart racing with excitement. At 27, she had built an online following for her bold videos, cliff jumps, underwater dives, and moments that showed her fearless spirit. Born and raised in Hawaii, the ocean had always been part of her life. She had spent years swimming along reefs and learning how to read tides, yet this dive was her most daring stunt yet. The cliff rose high above the sea, jagged and steep, with waves slamming against rocks below. The wind carried the smell of salt and spray, while seabirds wheeled overhead. Lila's friends stood nearby, ready to capture the jump. The tide was calm, the water clear enough to see coral and reef shadows beneath the surface. To her it looked safe, just deep enough to break the fall, just wild enough to thrill her audience. She steadied her breath, took a final look at the horizon, and leapt. The splash echoed across the small cove as her body cut through the water. For a few seconds, everything seemed perfect. She surfaced with a smile, shaking droplets from her hair, unaware of what moved below. The motion of her arms and legs sent ripples through the reef, creating flashes of light that drifted downward. From the depths, a tiger shark stirred, a massive predator that had been gliding near the rocks. Drawn by sound and motion, it turned sharply toward the surface. Without warning, the calm sea erupted. The shark surged upward, its wide jaws clamping around her lower body with immense force. The water frothed red as Lila screamed and thrashed. The predator twisted, dragging her beneath, then slamming her against the jagged reef below. Her friends on shore froze in horror as waves rolled violently, white foam mixing with blood. They grabbed flotation devices and tossed them toward her, but the distance was too great, and the current pulled everything away. Lila fought to reach the surface, her hands clawing at the water. For a moment her face broke through, gasping for air, before another violent pull dragged her under again. The sea around the rocks churned, the predator's movements shaking the surface. Each surge was faster, stronger, as the shark tested its grip, its instincts driven by the chaos of the moment. The turquoise water that had seemed so beautiful now turned dark with shadow and fear. By the time the waves began to calm, only fragments floated, a torn piece of her diving strap and ripples fading into the open sea. The screams from the cliff echoed faintly against the rocks, carried away by the wind. The ocean had swallowed its silence again, leaving only a haunting stillness beneath the bright Hawaiian sun. The sea settled into an eerie quiet after the violent struggle, the only movement from slow-rolling waves that washed against the cliff base. The small pieces of torn gear drifted in circles, carried by the shifting current. Lila's friends stood frozen, their bodies heavy with shock as they stared at the place where the water had churned so wildly only moments before. The bright sun continued to shine over the cove, but the scene below now felt cold and heavy, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. One of the floating aids thrown earlier spun near the rocks before slipping farther out to sea. The group tried to scramble down the cliff for a better view, but the jagged surface forced them to stop. Their hands shook as they waved and pointed, hoping for any sign of life, any movement that could mean she had surfaced again. But the water remained still, the surface smooth except for small swirls of foam drifting toward the open coast. Minutes passed with painful slowness. The shock gave way to panic as one of the witnesses sprinted back up the hill toward the trailhead, where cell reception was stronger. Others remained close to the cliff's edge, straining their eyes at the changing light on the waves. The earlier brightness now seemed harsh, reflecting off the surface in blinding flashes that made it harder to follow the drifting shapes below. Emergency calls traveled quickly, and soon the distant sound of sirens grew louder along the narrow coastal road. Rescue teams hurried to the site, carrying ropes, buoys, and medical kits. They approached with wide eyes, taking in the steep rocks and swirling tide. A coordinator pointed toward the cove where the scattered equipment still floated. The team formed a plan to reach the water from a safer angle farther down the shoreline, launching a small rescue craft into the rolling surf. The craft moved carefully through the reef zone, the engine humming low as the rescuers scanned the water. They checked every patch of floating material, lifting torn straps and bits of fabric into the boat. The calm that had returned to the sea made the task feel haunting, as if the earlier violence had already been washed away. The large predator was nowhere in sight, leaving only silence and scattered traces behind. After long minutes of searching, one rescuer found what they feared most. Farther out, where the reef dropped into deeper blue, they recovered the remains that the current had carried away from the cove. They placed them carefully into the craft before turning back toward land. The slow return felt unreal, each wave pushing them closer to a group of onlookers who already sensed the outcome. On shore, the atmosphere was heavy with grief. Medical staff set up a small barrier for privacy, while officers guided the stunned friends away from the edge. Faces were pale, hands pressed to mouths, legs unsteady. Some fell to their knees in the sand, unable to speak. The bright Hawaiian afternoon now felt muted, the wind softer, as if nature had withdrawn its warmth. News of the event spread quickly through the area, bringing local officials and safety experts to review the conditions around the cove. They examined tide charts, recent marine activity, and reports of large predators near the reef. Their findings confirmed that the combination of splashing, sudden entry, and shallow rock formations had created the perfect trigger for the powerful predator's instinctive strike. In the days that followed, a small memorial appeared at the cliff top. Locals and visitors placed shells, flowers, and palm leaves along the rocks. Some left candles, their soft glow warming the stone in the evening light. The memorial grew steadily, each gesture honoring a life that had embraced the ocean with joy and trust. The cove remained beautiful, but now held a quiet reminder of the risks hidden beneath its bright surface. The story spread far beyond the island, urging caution to others who sought thrills near wild waters. And though the waves continued to rise and fall, the memory of that day stayed etched into the cliffs, carried in the minds of all who had witnessed the sea's sudden and devastating power. On September 3, 2022, the air over the St. Johns River hung thick with humidity after a long night of rainfall. The river swelled past its banks, dark water rushing over grass and tree roots. 27-year-old Tobias Green stood at the edge of the flooded shoreline, his fishing gear neatly laid out beside him. He was known among friends as a patient angler, someone who found peace in the quiet rhythm of water and line. Since childhood, he had spent countless hours along this river, learning its currents, the best fishing spots, and the subtle signs of movement beneath the surface. That morning, the water seemed alive with activity. Baitfish flickered near the surface, scattering whenever ripples disturbed their calm. Tobias took it as a promising sign. He waded knee-deep, his boots sinking slightly into the soft mud below, the cool water swirling around his legs. The forest around him buzzed faintly with insects, and the low clouds made the river seem endless. It was the kind of morning he loved, silent, heavy, and full of waiting. What Tobias did not realize was that the same floodwaters drawing fish closer to shore had also brought something far more dangerous. Hidden in the murky current was a 9-foot bull shark, moving with quiet precision. These predators were known to tolerate fresh water, often venturing far inland during heavy rains when rivers swelled and prey was easy to find. The shark glided upstream, following the vibrations of struggling fish and faint scents carried through the cloudy water. Tobias cast his line and soon felt a tug. His rod bent sharply as he began to reel in a large catfish. The river splashed wildly as the fish fought back, breaking the stillness around him. Just as Tobias steadied himself, a sudden surge beneath the surface sent a wave of water against his knees. The shadow moved fast, too fast to see clearly. In an instant, the bull shark struck. Its jaws clamped around Tobias's calf, sending a jolt of pain through his body. He fell backward, his fishing rod slipping from his hands. The shark thrashed, shaking its head as mud and foam burst upward. Tobias kicked with all his strength, water splashing in every direction. The sharp teeth tore through skin, leaving a deep gash. But the shark released after a brief, violent moment. He tried to crawl toward the shallows, gasping, his leg bleeding heavily. The predator turned again, circling close, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface. Tobias's friend on the bank, already moving toward him, threw a rope across the water. Tobias grabbed it with trembling hands as another surge rippled behind him. He pulled with all his might, each movement burning with pain. The shark brushed past once more, its gray body glinting under the overcast light, before veering away into the murky depths. Tobias collapsed against the wet sand, his chest heaving, water dripping from his clothes. Around him, the river returned to its quiet rhythm, hiding the danger that had so suddenly appeared. Tobias lay on the soaked riverbank with water rolling off his clothes as the steady pulse of pain spread through his injured leg. The deep cut throbbed with every heartbeat, but he stayed conscious, focusing on the solid ground beneath him. The river behind him looked calm again, hiding the shape that had caused so much fear just moments before. His friend hurried toward him, moving carefully across the mud, keeping an eye on the shifting water in case the predator returned. The rain-heavy trees swayed slightly in the warm wind, adding a strange quiet to the moment. Tobias tried to lift himself a little, feeling the weight of the soaked clothes holding him down. His leg ached sharply, but he could still move it. The wound bled steadily, the water around it turning pale red as the river currents washed over the edge of the bank. His friend placed steady hands on him, helping him shift farther up the slope to avoid the pushing water. The dull ache spread up his thigh, but he focused on staying calm. Soon the faint sound of sirens approached from the dirt road behind the trees. 2 emergency responders reached him and knelt at his side with calm, practiced movements. One held his leg still while the other wrapped thick bandages tightly around the deep cut. Tobias felt a wave of dizziness as pressure was applied, but he gripped the grass to steady himself. The responders checked his breathing and pulse, noting that he was alert and able to answer simple questions, even though he was pale and shaking. The river continued its slow movement, carrying bits of broken branches and leaves from the night of rain. Nothing broke the surface now. The predator had moved on, returning to the deeper water where the currents hid its path. The responders lifted Tobias carefully onto a stretcher and carried him toward the waiting vehicle. As they moved, he looked back at the wide stretch of river where he had been standing only minutes earlier. It was hard to believe how quickly the peaceful spot had changed into a place of danger. When the ambulance doors closed, the responders cleaned more of the mud off his leg and added new layers of bandages to control the bleeding. The ride to the clinic was rough over the uneven road, but Tobias kept his eyes open the entire time. He breathed slowly, trying to settle the shaking in his hands. The responders watched him closely, reminding him to keep still as they pressed cool packs around the swelling. At the small clinic near town, nurses took over, guiding him onto a bed and inspecting the injury. They noted the deep laceration but found no signs of broken bone. Fresh bandages were applied, and the bleeding slowed under the careful pressure. Tobias rested back against the thin pillow, tired but grateful. By morning, the news had traveled quickly through the fishing community. People gathered near the river to discuss what had happened, surprised at how close the predator had come to the shore. Many spoke quietly about how easily floodwaters altered wildlife behavior. Tobias later returned home with his leg wrapped tightly and movement limited. The experience stayed with him, a reminder of how fast a calm moment could turn dangerous in rising water. Though shaken, he remained steady, grateful he had survived what could have ended far worse.